and this is my learning teaching interaction number 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with chapter 4, the component display theory. The first part of it is, there's 2 parts to it, and the first part is the expository, and this is to present and tell or show. So first is tell a rule or a principle, and then the next is to give an example or a story that supports that principle. And in this section, they talked about using stories to teach principles, and it can help the learner see how a principle applies to real life. As I look at it, my personal life, I relate better to learning experiences when it has to do with a story or something that I can relate to my own life, thinking, oh yeah, that's happened in my life and that's what was going on. So that really helps me. As I was reading this, I also couldn't help but think how the Savior taught in parables, and he used stories that the people could relate to help them understand the overall principle. And even as little kids, they remember more when you tell them a story that helps teach them a lesson rather than just facts. Another part of the using stories is be sensitive towards your audience and their needs. As you learn about your audience needs, you'll be able to address them as you teach with the stories. And also make sure, I thought it was interesting that they mentioned that make sure your stories meet the needs of your audience. To where if the story, you have to stretch it to make it relevant in your teaching, then you probably just shouldn't use it, and you should just find a different story if you're set on using a story. The next part was helping learners take the principle home, and this is the second part of the component display theory, to where it's question, ask, and then practice. So first of all, you invite learners to express the rule or principle in their own words. I thought it was interesting how it said if they answer, it kind of gave you what to do if they answer not quite the right answer, I guess you could say. It says that you could not, suggest how to modify their statement to capture the full meaning of the principle. So respond after they say that to help clarify the principle. So the goal is to push the learners towards action. And then also ask learners to think of personal experiences that illustrate the principle. I know in past classes when the teachers have talked about thinking of your own personal experiences that demonstrate a certain principle, I'm more likely to remember that principle because it's already a memory in my life, and so I tie that principle to that memory, and it helps me learn it and remember it. And then when I get home, I'm more excited to share it because I remember it. Another part of this was finding instructional balance. So balance between the leader talking and the participants talking. I thought it was interesting that it doesn't mean equal time talking, but just having the participants involved. And I think this is important. That way the participants feel involved, and it makes it more interesting for them as well. And then there's certain principles of instruction. First, make sure it addresses the instruction addresses the real problems. Kind of like the storytelling, make sure it's relevant and really narrows down and pinpoints what the principle that you're talking about. The second thing is activating an existing knowledge. This part I found really interesting. I've never thought of this. It says learning happens when existing knowledge is activated as a foundation for new knowledge. And as I read this, I thought more of it. And every time I've started a class, if it's all new material, I almost get overwhelmed and stressed out. And it's harder for me to learn it. But if they start with even one thing that I know, it's like, oh yeah, I know that. Okay, yeah. And it builds on that already existing knowledge that I have. Then the power of demonstration. I know learning is often easier when new knowledge is demonstrated to the learner. I remember several times when actual activities, I learned a lot from activities or demonstrations because it's a visual of what's going on. And then applying the new knowledge. It's also, once you apply the new knowledge, it also helps you learn. And I think of this even in math problems. I'm in a math class right now as well, and I read, but as I apply the knowledge that I know to my homework assignments or to the tests, it helps me remember it rather than just reading it and being done with it. I actually take what I learned and apply it to my problem that I'm trying to solve. Chapter 5 is the art of teaching. It talks about how effective teaching has 3 elements: relevance, respect, and participation. And that's respect even when mistakes are made. I really like that, and as I look back, I respect people and teachers more even when I made a mistake and they didn't. It wasn't a humiliating experience, I guess you could say that it was still a positive experience. Then relationships, it helps when relationships are the basis for helping. The quality of relationships is the most important thing. And I'm realizing I'm getting kind of short on time, so I'm going to keep it going. Combine compassion with passion. I really like this because if you have compassion for your participants and passion for the subject, these are 2 things that will leave the experience better. And I feel like in our line of work with the family life education, if you show compassion for the person that you're working with and passion for the subject, it shows the person that you really care about them and care about learning more about their personal situation and helping them. And it makes it go over smoother. Alright, so chapter 6, teaching skills and tools in family life education. It talked a lot about group discussions, and I love the different examples it gave of group discussions. 4 things that it went over of a good group discussion is, first of all, it needs to have structure and then linkage. So it needs to link between the principal and so what you're teaching the principal. You need to summarize and be able to answer questions and explain questions to your participants. So a couple of the different ways of group discussion were the fishbowl, the buzz groups, and the family council. I had never heard of the fishbowl, and I thought that was really neat that you got to sit there and listen to the other side without any interruptions, the other side of the argument, I guess you could say. And then in the buzz groups, I always like that because everybody in class or everybody that's participating has a chance to talk and express their opinion. And then family council I really like because I feel I have had several family councils, and this way everyone in the family gets to voice their opinion and preference. Chapter 7 is working with diverse audiences. Every family is diverse. I think people need to remember that. People's experiences in family life will affect the way they act in and the way they react to situations. So there was just different ways that they're diverse. I think the biggest one were the different values that people have. Being aware that each person brings a unique set of experiences and sensitivities. to any interchange really helps. I think that's an awesome way to look at it, that instead of they're different and their values are different, that they bring a unique set of experiences to the conversation. A couple other different values that are very diverse or different time orientations: work ethic, family structure. Were a couple of them that are very different that you need to be aware of. The next part was skilled dialogue. The three things that help you have a skilled dialogue are respect, reciprocity, and responsiveness. Another thing was know your audience. I think this is a huge thing. The better you know your audience, the better you're able to connect with them and to narrow down your teaching to help them specifically. And then the last one is be flexible. It talked about avoiding the one-size-fits-all approach. I really like this because everybody's different, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all for different families. And then the last thing is some ideas might not be taught, but needs will be met instead. And I think this is really important, just to keep the needs of people in mind over even the principals sometimes. And that way their needs are met. And thank you so much.